With just 2 rounds to play in the candidates tournament, it was make or break time for Anand's rivals. Could they catch him? First of all, let's take a look at the game between Dmitry Andreikin and Levon Aronian. Aronian really had to go for a win in this game, but things didn't work out, and Andreikin, an excellent technical player, arrived in this endgame with the white pieces. You can see that white has this advanced passed pawn on the queen side. Black's king is miles away from it, really can't blockade, help with the defence there at all, while white's king is ready to support that passed pawn. A desperate situation for Aronian. Here's how the game went. Rook c6 from Andreikin. Excellent strategy. So he's just trying to get rid of this rook, and after the exchange the pawn will be advanced further, and with the support of the rook and the king it'll all be over. So the rook retreated. The king took the pawn. A rook check, but the king can be shielded very well by the rook, and the pawn advances further, so all going according to plan for Andreikin. Aronian sought counterplay with the rook, but this is a good move. You can just forget about the king side, just move the king in, and we just need to get rid of the rook and advance this pawn. The rook came across, but now it's desperate. And this next move, I think, is excellent. Very good technical move. So the rook is going to shield the king from checks. One of these rooks, I'm not sure which, probably doesn't matter. But also if the rook comes behind the pawn like this, then again this rook can just move over to shield the pawn, and it's going through. And basically from this moment on, it was clear that Aronian was completely lost. So an excellent win from Andreikin. So Aronian was out of the picture after that loss. Okay, well, let's turn to the game between Karjakin and Anand. Well, Karjakin had not the best opening, but then Anand faltered. And this is the situation after 38 moves, Karjakin with the white pieces. So it's a situation where white has a bishop and knight against a rook, so that's a material advantage, but all pawns are on the same side of the board, so obviously that gives Anand some drawing chances. These endgames are very difficult for both sides, but maybe particularly for the defender, because you have tough choices to make. One choice is, which pieces do you exchange? So here, for example, in this position, Anand has a choice. Should he exchange here, or should he move the rook? Well, he moved the rook, but maybe it would have been better to trade off. Now, obviously, knight takes rook, knight takes knight is just a drawn endgame. So white continues to play for the win like this. The knight defends the g-pawn. And here, if black sits there, I think it's going to be difficult. But if he creates counterplay with g5, then this looks like a reasonable chance to draw. And one of the points is this. I mean, you know, for the moment, white is actually struggling to make progress here. If the knight moves, then this pawn drops. And, you know, sometimes black can create counterplay with the h-pawn as well. And one of the points is that if white simplifies too much here, then this kind of endgame should be a draw, because all black needs to do is sacrifice his rook for the pawn, and this should be a draw. It should be a draw. I mean, we have to give this one up first, but the point is you can't force a checkmate with two knights against a lone king. But Anand chose to play in a different way. He played rook here. So the bishop moved, and he moved the rook across to f1. Now this also looks reasonable, keeping an active rook. And after this, black is threatening counterplay like this, so that has to be stopped. And Anand said after the game that he felt he wanted to get rid of one of the knights. He felt uncomfortable with these knights sort of circling around. They're so tricky, he said. So he traded off this way. And they reached this position. The problem is that if black simplifies down and then sacrifices his rook for the last white pawn, then white could still get a checkmate with bishop and knight against the lone king. So I think for that reason it's a slightly dubious decision that Anand made. And here's the next tough decision that white has to make, that black has to make, that the defender has to make. Do you sit there, or do you somehow advance your pawns and change the pawn structure? Well, let's have a look and see what happens if black just sits there. The problem is white can actually make progress by advancing. Well, black shouldn't allow this pawn to be isolated because it will be possible to gang up on it. But if he takes, then in this position the knight can come into d5 and suddenly this f6 pawn is targeted. And that's an unpleasant endgame for black. So I think Anand made a good practical decision here, and he sought counterplay on the king side. Now, Karjakin exchanged. Now I think this is a good decision because of course he wants to isolate the e-pawn. At the moment, of course, that can't be taken, but still later on that could be a target. Of course, there is a drawback to this, that sometimes black has counterplay by creating a pass pawn. Okay, that's why Karjakin brought the king back, so he's got out of this pin, and of course there's a threat to play bishop takes pawn. And here already we can see how tricky this is for black. If Vishy makes a sort of normal move to protect the e-pawn, then white advances, and well, if this is taken, then there's a check and a knight fork, and if g takes f4, then g takes f4. Once again, if this is taken, then there's a knight fork, but otherwise white is going to simply capture the pawn on e5, and this must be a winning position for white. Likewise, if king to f6 here, then f4 wins because of this pin. So Anand had to come back with the rook to protect the pawn, and that's already a bit uncomfortable. You know, you'd prefer to keep an active rook with black. And here Karjakin made a committal move. He played g4. Afterwards he said that he thought he had big chances to win this position, but couldn't see anything, you know, a win by force. Now maybe he should play like this. So okay, the bishop hits the pawn, and then the knight bounces round. So we're looking to target this e-pawn with pieces like this. Now if white has time to play knight d3, then this is starting to look pretty nasty. So, you know, I think the only way for black to deal with this is to gain counterplay. And this is touch and go. It's very hard to say whether this is winning or not. Certainly if the e-pawn is defended, then this should be a very easy win. Remember, the king and pawn endings are always going to be winning after, you know, if black takes here. So white is guaranteed to win this pawn, should be winning. But if black rushes the pawn down the board, this is still a tricky position. Obviously white has excellent winning chances, but with the pawn here, one never knows. Still a difficult endgame. But Karjakin said he didn't see anything clear, so therefore he pushed with the g-pawn. He thought this was winning. Now if Anand trades, this is certainly very promising for white. basically white can target both these pawns. This is a very nice move. The knight comes to f3, hitting g5, hitting e5. One of these pawns is going to drop. So correctly, Anand played h4, trying to find counterplay here. And both players had seen that this position could be reached. Basically, white needs to target the g-pawn. This is how the game went. And here we have a crunch position. This is the reason Karjakin went for g4, because he thought that after knight takes g5 he should be winning. The problem is that in this king and pawn ending, life is not so clear. Basically, Karjakin had seen that something like h3, then white does win this position. It's basically white is able to triangulate. And now not king h2, king h4, that's white gets nowhere, but instead you triangulate. First of all, you just wait, and then if king h4, king h2, and the pawn is lost. But instead, if we go back here, black does not need to push this pawn. You can drop back with the king, and here you wait. Basically, black shuffles back and forth, and only when the king advances to h3 do you come to g5, and that's a drawn position. And likewise, if white waits, well, you just wait. Draw. So this was the problem. Suddenly, Karjakin realised that he couldn't just keep going straight in a straightforward manner. Also, if he tries to take this pawn with the bishop, that's actually winning for black. You can see the knight's attacked and the bishop is attacked as well. So basically, in this position, there was no way for white to make progress, and they went round in circles for many, many moves, but Karjakin got absolutely nowhere. I mean, they actually went to move 90, but Karjakin made no progress, and the game ended in a draw, which means that with just one round to play, Anand leads with 8 points, and his rivals are all a point and a half behind. Aronian, Karjakin, Kramnik, Mamedyarov, and Andreikin all have 6.5 points. So Anand cannot be caught. He's won the tournament with a round to spare. Incredible. So we will have a World Championship match in November between Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, and the new challenger, Viswanathan Anand. Congratulations to him.